What's going on, everyone? Ryan Miles here from Alto Reality Gaming, here with Benjamin Bargetzi, representing Europe and the Complexity Card Gaming team as our. I just want to kind of talk about the North American meta, the world's meta from the Day 2 event, just like what New Frontiers in general looks like, what my opinion is, what his opinion is, and what like the differences are across the regions. So Ben obviously talks a lot with the Italian players, with the German players, just most of the European region. So we'll be getting kind of his opinion, and then my obviously more correct opinion. So Ben, why don't you go first, and then I'll prove you wrong. But what do you think the meta looks like right now?
Okay, so yeah, we had this event recently in Italy, and we saw like 3 Time Spinning Witch and 1 Chamimi in the top 4. There were only 20 people though, but I still think like we can get some data from this. I'm not only talking to Italian and German players, but also to the Spanish and the Singaporean. And in Singapore, there was a tournament where Brunhild did pretty well. And it did pretty well at Worlds Day 1, so I think people were in general like really looking out for seeing how Brunhild does. Same for Lucifer, I guess.
Yeah.
And yeah, at Worlds we also saw Gil doing pretty well. So we have like a wide variety of decks, like more control-ish decks like Gil. We have like more mid-range-ish decks like the Time Spinning Witch, which has also more aggressive versions. The Chamimi in Italy was very aggressive. Which is interesting, like a very zoo version, a swarm version, where you just go wide with many bodies. And the Singaporean, the Brunhild list was also very aggressive. So the interesting thing is that actually, on day 2, I actually played Kirik just for the memes. I always want to play Kirik. There's picks in there. I love the deck. But I even died to a Gil deck, which should be my best matchup once they have 4 white leaves and the arrival of the hero. So I think it's a really bad deck for a pure aggro deck. But interestingly, as we see now across Singapore, day 2 even, and not day 2 actually not so much. This was more like mid-range-ish, control-ish lists. But like if you see now the Italian tournament and like Singapore, you see more like decks that are not aggro decks, but just try to put a lot of bodies on the board and try to hit your opponent down pretty fast. So it's like, I don't really know how to categorize those decks as like, don't know, aggressive mid-range decks, just like swarm decks, basically. But yeah, that's what I see all over. And I think people just feel like playing something fast because they don't want to die to Gil. So I think that's
right.
I think they're kind of scared because Gil is a deck with a lot of skill. And it's a deck that is always like, you're not sure what you're doing against it. You're always like scared of what's happening next. Same for Time Spinning Witch. So I think people just say, fuck that, I just put stuff on the board and hit you in the face. And to wrap this up, like in Italy, for example, I know Gil was extremely popular, so I'm actually surprised to see so many aggressive lists. I would have really guessed to see more Gils and more like mid-range-ish Time Spinning Witches, whereas in Germany, they really like aggressive decks. So I think Brunhild and Chamimi, your creation, will get a lot of resonance there. Yeah, I guess that's like a really, really broad overview over the European meta predictions I would have.
No, I can definitely agree with that. It feels like the Chamimi deck and the new version of the Time Spinning Witch deck have this thing in common whereas Kirik is going to like play very single powerful resonators and then try to burn you out over the top after they get in that initial damage, the Chamimi and the Time Spinning Witch lists are just playing efficient 1-mana creatures, trying to play as many creatures as quickly as possible. And even though that leaves them a little bit weak to black tiers, just the fact that they get more damage in quickly, because you can only remove like 1 thing a turn as the Gil deck, they're just able to push more damage early, because like the Gil deck is going to get killed by stuff like the 5th element. As soon as Gil flips, it's Arrival of the Hero. They have more power packed into a single resonator in Kirik, whereas the other decks have more power spread out across the board. So they're actually able to push more damage like that.
I like this analysis a lot, yeah. I think Gil is pretty well able to handle things that cost a lot of stuff, like important things, like, you know, for example, I don't know, I put like a piggy on the board I need and you just kill it, or PL ups to like really needs this early damage, otherwise he runs out of hand card. And once Gil judgments or even plays the Lapis resonator, like it's over for Kirik almost. He cannot even fly over it anymore. Whereas those lists, they don't really require the game to go this fast. They can set up their game and then later take it over. And I think that's what Gil is really scared of. Like just wasting a 5th element on a 1-drop just feels like terrible.
Yeah, you're not pulling ahead when you do that. You're just kind of keeping the game even, and that lets the aggressive deck continue to apply pressure.
Exactly. Like if you could do this consistently, like playing even, like you would win as a control deck probably, but you're just not going to do that. Like you cannot play only removal, like that's not going to work. Yeah.
Yeah.
And one interesting thing I also want to mention, because I know it's a card you don't like, is that most 1-drops builds played Gretel, and I think Gretel
in that deck, I think
cool.
it's very good. Absolutely.
Oh, okay,
Yeah, yeah.
okay.
It also plays the Jormungandr, which gives it like very easy activations for the Gretel. Like you just have more stuff, and because you're playing this very low curve deck, you get to play multiple cards a turn, and then when you're using Gretel to reload your hand, you get to almost never run out of threats, especially against the Gil deck. So now the Gil feels compelled to kill your Gretel because it's kind of the biggest threat because it's drawing you so many cards, but it's like the weakest Resonator you control because Jormungandr is like a 9/9 or a 14/14 depending on how many times you sack a stone. So it makes
exactly what I want to say.
Yeah.
So that's also maybe why we see these aggressive lists doing well. Maybe because Italy is so Gil focused, like those lists did really well. Like just putting something aggressive there, because usually triangle is like control loses to super aggression loses to mid range loses to control. Right? It's the normal circle of life and force of will. And so maybe these lists were just like a one-time wonder, even because everyone played Gil and they just crushed it. Like I don't really know that. I didn't really see the other decks. I think they were not uploaded, but I really guessed, especially after Di Clemente won with Gil in Worlds Day 2. So I think Gil was really well represented. And yeah, of course, if you play a deck that beats Gil consistently, then yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
I definitely think that Gil was the boogeyman coming out of the Worlds event. Like it felt like it was the deck that had the target on its back with like kind of Time Splitting Witch in the backseat, because Time Splitting Witch is that deck where if you're not prepared for it, if you're not a green deck, if you don't have Lorite, like it will just beat you by itself. So like you either play Gil and you beat Time Splitting Witch, or you play something that beats Gil and then you like lose to Time Splitting Witch. So the fact that now Time Splitting Witch gets to be this deck that can be aggressive enough to beat Gil and also gets to still be Time Splitting Witch in every other matchup and then just lock you out of stones, it does feel like Time Splitting Witch is suddenly becoming the deck to beat. At least that's what I'm expecting for the American tournament coming up this weekend.
Also like, as you know, like I got quite a lot of private messages asking me for the new front sheet. And I mean, this is not like, I won't spoil anyone's personal list, but most lists I received were indeed Time Splitting Witch. So I think she has gained a lot of popularity. Yeah. And I think Gil is not really that popular in America. Is that true?
So it's just the fact that it's a deck that takes a lot of skill to play, and there are not a lot of like hardcore dedicated Force of Will players in America. Like it's pretty much just the people you see all the time that really put enough hours into the game to be able to play Gil at a level that would be required for a tournament of this caliber. You know what I mean? Like, I remember Steph put up a poll about the skill floor, and while there's a whole bunch of debate going about that, like Gil is a deck where if you don't know what you're doing, you will lose matchups you should win just because there's so many decision trees that you need to be able to make like on instinct. And it's just like, I don't think that anyone takes the game seriously enough to play the game that much to like put, 10 hours a week into the deck just to have that kind of reflexive instinct on what cards you need to search, when it's okay to flip, that kind of stuff. So really, and in general, America generally prefers the aggressive strategies. So I was kind of expecting more Keurig, but as the Chimimi list becomes more popular and Chimimi does have a better matchup against Time Splitting Witch, whereas like Time Splitting Witch will just like clap Keurig, I honestly think that Chimimi might be the deck that I would expect to see the most at like the next American event, because it does fit our staple of aggressive. We love broken cards, so we love Forest Meditation, and then on top of that, it's got a decent matchup against Gil, and it's got a decent matchup against Time Splitting Witch, which are like the two boogeymen. So that's kind of where I think our meta is headed. But what do you think about the European region? Because you were saying earlier that you don't think Chimimi is going to pick up in Europe a little bit.
Yeah, I just kind of feel like I think Chimimi is going to be played mostly by German people, if I can generalize it that much. Like because as you said, as we analyzed, like Keurig is not really a viable option anymore. I just realized I have this cool dog in the background watching the video. No, but Keurig is not a smart option, like, in all honesty. Like, I don't think it's a really smart choice to go to a GP with Keurig if even your best matchup, Gil, beats you after sideboarding, probably, unless you start with Dark Magin Elf, and then buy. Yeah. Which I did game 1.
Yeah, that'll do it.
But then, yeah, game 2 and 3 I lost. So kind of like, even your best matchup is like at best like 55, 60 for you. And yeah, there's Time Splitting Witch, which you just cannot beat, probably. Yeah, and there's Chimimi, which probably I cannot beat. So I think Keurig is pretty much out of the equation. Like, I therefore think the people who like the aggro deck will just look, okay, what is the closest to an aggro deck we get? And it's just stuff that says swiftness, or stuff that says I have a lot of borders and just hit you in the face. And I think the question now is, will these people more likely to switch to Palace decks, which would be Imo maybe, but more likely Time Spinning Witch,
Right.
or will they switch to like something like the Brunhild list, like where you just have little, like you have swiftness resonators, or will they more like play Jamimi? I just haven't seen anyone around here playing around with Jamimi. Like maybe it might just be availability heuristic, like I just don't see them, so I think they will not play it. But I honestly, like, if I would go to a German GP, I would rather expect people to bring Brunhild than Jamimi, just from how popular Brunhild was hyped already before the Worlds. And so, if you look at Worlds, I think the coolest deck list there by far was probably the Brunhild list from Japan.
For day one, absolutely. No, 100%.
Yeah, it was amazing deck. And so I would have loved to play this. And like even now I'm getting like kind of attracted to Brunhild just because I saw it can do cool stuff at Worlds. I played against Naoyuki Yada in Swiss, and it was a great game, and Brunhild just almost killed me. So I was really impressed by the deck. So I think there we can really talk about Brunhild as well. And if there's a solid Brunhild list, I think it's going to be very popular in the German region especially. Gil is probably going to focus on Italy, but if in Italy people switch to Time Spinning Witch now, I think, which actually we also saw before, like in Italy you saw a lot of Time Spinning Witch and Gil being played.
Right.
And now that 2 is like taking over, it's like it makes sense that this kind of camp takes over the meta.
I do think that the Brunhild list also does have a good Gil matchup because it does the same thing as the aggressive list where it actually builds very wide, very unbreakable boards. And Jeanne d'Arc becomes a very real threat where if I'm consistently sticking multiple resonators, then my Jeanne d'Arc is unkillable. And if I can attack into your Gil and make it a 4/4, it becomes much more easy for me to kill it like later on in the game. So, and because Brunhild also has the rune deck, it just starts the game with an extra 5 cards in hand. That's like really difficult for Gil to be able to consistently counterspell you out of the game. Like Brunhild just keeps having gas, is consistently able to throw threats at the Gil deck, specifically at the ruler, to get it dead, so that you can finally just kill Gil over the top. So while Brunhild does, what was that?
Like also, if they play like the Lapis Resonator, you can also just swing in this one and make it like a joke. So they wasted 4 mana for almost nothing. So that's also like, Jeanne d'Arc is a really terrible card, or like terribly good against that thing that relies on J rulers or like single cards like Ayu or Aimul, Gil.
But the problem I think with Brunhild is just that it has basically no interaction against Time Spinning Witch, and because it's like the other deck, like I don't want to bring this deck to an event, probably have a good Chamimi matchup, probably have a good Gil matchup, and then just have absolutely 0% chance of beating Time Spinning Witch. And I don't even know if it beats Kirik. I'm assuming with the Spear of the Valkyrie it probably does, but like Time Spinning Witch does seem to be that deck where I don't want to lose because I don't have Lorite in my deck, you know?
And I mean, but one thing you have to, like, I see the Lorite argument, but one thing you really should consider is the Brunhild's rune deck. Like they can just bring humans for free, which is pretty cool, and they can just blow up the board. And I mean, blowing up the board against a deck that goes wide invests resources. I mean, don't forget, we don't play Tama anymore. Like the stuff doesn't really replace itself immediately, like Gretel does in the long run and so forth. But if you're just gonna swarm the board with Jamimi or with Time Spinning Witch, and then I just flip over the board wipe, and maybe I have Jeanne d'Arc on my board, which cannot be destroyed, and I basically just final battle you for free. That's kind of a big issue. Like the Palace decks were always like, they were like winning every game 1, and then game 2, once the Black Tears showed up and more final battles, they just died. And now Bruno is like this one deck that still is like, oh, I have my Black Tears in the sideboard, and I have my my final battle in the main board. And I think that's actually gives it kind of some hope against the Time Spinning Witch matchup. I mean, in Italy, we saw 2 types of Time Spinning Witches. One was the Palace Swarm version, and one was the more like, you know, the lockdown Time Spinning Witch. And I think probably the lockdown version is much harder to beat for Brunhild, as because they want to be aggressive. They just put stuff on board and tap out, and then you just get stone locked like forever, and then they have 15 bodies on the board, and I mean, that's not so funny. And I mean, those lists also play Palace, but they more play the Palace for the mid to late game to give their resonators flying, and then you have 10 flying dinosaurs, and that pretty hurts the face, I think. So yeah, that's I would still agree with you. Probably Time Spinning Witch Palace, the aggressive version, would do pretty well against Brunhild, but I think it's not as disastrous as you described it.
Yeah, I mostly think like the distortion of time and just not at all having any answer into your deck. You're basically guaranteed to miss calling a stone twice in a game. Like if you are a mid-range deck where like your power plays are Jeanne d'Arc, you really want to keep calling stones because you want to play multiple cards a turn. So I just feel like missing stone calls multiple times in a game against an aggressive deck would be kind of backbreaking. But I can see your argument with just like having Odin's Judgment being able to reset the game just might be able to keep you in it long enough. And of course you do have the life gain from the Spirit of Valkyrie, so you probably could survive the aggression, but I don't know. Jormungandr killing Jeanne d'Arc is also kind of scary.
Yeah, that's true, and especially there's like no. I'm just checking the list. Like they have the bounce spell, of course. They can bounce back. They can bounce back Jeanne d'Arc.
Yeah, and that's like tempo advantage because I'm paying 1 mana to put your 2-drop back in your hand. I'm also drawing a card and I'm pushing damage the whole time.
And there's like Vivian for the sideboard.
Just a flyer, just a 3-mana flyer. Oh, and it has 2 creature types. It's a fairy and a machine, so yeah, +2/+2 off the addition.
And there's the side. Okay, let's talk about the sideboard maybe. I see the both decks, both the top 4 Time Spinning Witch played the sideboard into just
machines, right? Yeah.
Like, which matchup do you think was this against?
I don't actually know. I was kind of thinking about that. I guess it's just a transformative sideboard in the sense that you're playing this aggressive Kingdom deck game 1, and then you know that people are going to side in Black Tears, so then you bring in Lancelots, and now suddenly you have this completely different game plan where you're still an aggressive deck, but you're no longer weak to Black Tears. So
yeah,
and
I guess, yeah.
I think it also incentivizes them to side out removal. Like, because I'm only playing 1-drops, the best that your removal is going to do is kill my 1-drops for your 1 mana. So you almost maybe side out some of your single target removal to side in for the Black Tears, and then suddenly my Lancelot's a problem and you have no ways to kill it, or less ways to kill it. That's probably an impactful thing as well. At least when you don't know it's coming. Now that we've seen the lists, maybe that's not the most optimal sideboard anymore, but going into this event, it probably was.
But it's still like, yeah, definitely, I agree. It was, but it's still like, I think it's pretty annoying. If you play against Time Spinning Witch and you're like, okay, is this guy going to stay on Palace or is it going to be machines all over in game 2? And I mean, of course, you can check your opponent. You can check how many cards are siding.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you're experienced in the game, you will make it in a way that the opponent cannot just count the cards you're siding.
Yeah.
So you could also do stuff like just side in 15 cards and side them out again. Leave your opponent really mad.
I've done that a couple times. Anyway, I want to get into some fun backstory. But last topic, I think, before we wrap this up, where do you think IU stands in this meta game? Is IU something you expect to see in Europe? Is that I'm a little terrified of it, but that's like one of the main reasons I feel like I have to play a green deck. Another reason I put Chamimi above, Kirik and Brunhild, because Chamimi does have access to Lorite and Scarlet's Agony, and Feyer's spell for the Resuscitating Will. It's very, very important. So where do you put IU in this meta?
IU is actually something I want to mention anyway. Thank you. I kept thinking for the whole video like I forgot something. It was IU.
It was IU.
Well, I'm in the team with Lars, so how could I forget IU? No, no, but basically, I mean, IU. It's really annoying to play her without dual stones. I think it's kind of annoying, but still, it's like, I mean, just having a 10/10 imperishable is scary, like very scary. And usually IU loses to like combo decks that swarm the field, but she doesn't really lose to aggro decks, right? For most of it, because she's gonna flip and kill your opponent. But with the new stone setup, which I by the way don't really like, I miss dual stones.
Of course.
But with the new stones setup, I'm not sure how. I don't have a clear opinion on IU. Probably you never have. That's like the one deck you're like, oh, is she's gonna show up again or not? So I think for me, like, I just know having Palace in the meta is pretty annoying for IU, because you're just gonna make everything fly if you Judgment with the Time Spinning Witch, and then everything can block IU. Also, you can just lock her stones because IU needs to play on curve. Like, I think, but she doesn't need to play fully on curve, but still, like, if you just lock, IU's a deck that you can easily lock down. I think. Like, she cannot just keep mana open. She has to do stuff.
Right.
So I use a deck that you can easily just like Mosasaurus, time walk. And I mean, that's GG for IU. Even if she's a super powerful ruler, but yeah, if you don't have mana, you're not doing much in this game. Against Gil, it's troublesome. Like it was pretty easy actually to beat Gil with Ayu with dual stones because you just play a lot of resonators, big resonators, and then Gil is handling them and actually taps out, and then you just judgment Ayu and you have your whole shenanigans you can do. So, but now without the dual stones, I didn't really check the database yet if there's enough big resonator to play to like keep this pressure up, because I think that's the best way to. Yeah, I don't think so either, and that's what I mean. Like I think what I'm trying to get at here is I think Ayu, just from her nature, has still a space in the meta, but it's really important to find a new way to play her. I mean, this new way of just putting resonators on the board, forcing opponent to waste hand cards, and then judgmenting Ayu. This was kind of introduced with Sherry, like as a reaction to Sherry. But I think now the Ayu style needs a new. There's a new Ayu style is needed. Like first you had like these OTK Ayus, these really aggressive Ayus. Then you had this more like, body-based, tempo-based Ayus. And maybe now we need something new altogether again. I mean, you lost Door of Time, you lost Precious Leap, you lost the OTK options. You have Reshating Will. But still, like, I really think that if there's an Ayu coming out, it will not be something like we saw before. The whole mentality behind the deck must be different. I'm pretty sure. Otherwise, you're not going to handle the Swarm and the Palaces.
Yeah, I do think that the Swarm decks are kind of threatening, but the lack of Severing Winds and the lack of counterspells in the non-green decks means that Ayu can very reliably just God Art for Resuscitating Will, and then there's just no interaction with that in decks that are not specifically TSW, Gil, Chamimi. So the Brunhild decks, the Lucifer decks, the Kirik decks, the Zoo Time Spinning Witch deck, the one that doesn't play any green at all, doesn't have access to Fair Spell or Lorite, like those decks almost feel like they can't beat Ayu because she always has access to Resuscitating Will as long as she's able to find a white stone, like you said. So it is kind of like almost a Fox meta again, where in your first few stones, you really need to find that possession stone so you have access to your white mana so you can just OTK someone with only 2 souls. And because of the Pierce...
I like that.
Yeah. Because of the Pierce Samurai, you just can't... Even with flyers, you can't stop yourself from taking 5,000 damage in the air. And even with 2 blockers, you just can't block that much damage. So... But she does lose to the tier 1 decks.
I think after our talk, like what I would predict as tier 1, like let's say statistically, not like in terms of strength, but maybe also correlated. I would say that the most played decks is definitely going to be Palace Witch and Midrange Witch, like those 2 decks. Chamimi, I'm not sure. I'm honestly not sure. Not because it's a bad deck, but because I think that it might be a bit too new for people. But yeah, being green is always great with Lorite, of course. I think Ayu is not going to be played a lot, but maybe be played well. Brunhild is the same. I think it's not going to be played a lot, but maybe like well. Kirik, I think it's going to disappear, and if not, then it's just going to die, sadly. I like pickies.
I think at the American event, despite the fact that I don't think Kirik is very good, I still expect to see a lot of it just because it is a popular deck among Americans. So,
but like if you look at it, it loses to Brunhild, it loses to Gil.
Does not matter what it loses to. You will see it as like 20% of the field because we're Americans and we love our red decks.
But I honestly think it's the worst time for Kirik ever, probably. Like I think there's no matchup it wins. Probably.
I think it actually beats Chamimi. So I think Chamimi might be the correct deck.
I was thinking about like Chamimi, maybe. I am.
Yeah. But Lorite's Disciples is a very powerful card. And then, yes, Kirik has Pathway Part to slow down the Lorite's Disciples by returning it to your hand. But Chamimi is the green deck, so it has access to Fair Spell. So as long as Chamimi can survive long enough to get to be able to play it and have Fair Spell open to stop Pathway Part, and it can gain the 900 life and kill a Resonator at the same time, that's just a very powerful thing. So it can stabilize.
Yeah, even if they go Heavenly Pole on Lorite, they still waste the mana. I think aggro is a deck that cannot waste mana, which is also why it's so weak to Time Spinning Witch, because you always need to tap out. Like aggro, I said, Ayu kind of needs to tap out always, not necessarily, but aggro needs to tap out every turn.
Yeah,
and that's just Time Spinning says thank you very much.
Yep.
So yeah, but I see your argument. I'm not sure if the best deck is just a Time Spinning Witch deck with green and the Zoo version, which is kind of getting tricky with the deck slots, or if it's just something that sides into green, which I'm a huge opponent of. I really don't like changing color stones. You have 15 deck slots for betters. I really don't like changing colors with the side. But yeah, in general, I think time spin witch is going to be super popular. I think we're still going to see some Gil, but really decreasingly, especially in the American tournament this weekend.
Of course, yeah.
I think we're going to see some Brunhild. We're going to see some Lucifers. Yeah, and Jamimis probably.
I
Like,
completely agree.
yeah. So let me just ask you, out of those four, what would you play if you would go? I know you go, but what would you right now play?
Um, I mean, it's kind of a toss-up between Chamimi and Time Spinning Witch. Personally, I cannot see myself not playing a deck with Greenstones. I'm too
No,
scared of Ayu.
just no. Don't lie, don't lie. You just cannot see yourself playing a deck that you didn't originate. I know you.
No, I just can't not play Lorite. I'm terrified of Ayu. I want to be able to side deck Scarlet's Agony. I'm terrified of Time Spinning Witch. I want to play Lorite. I think that Fair's spell is actually still really good against Gil, but I don't want to play Gil because it just randomly loses to like some other stuff. And I think it's still like a very big deck on most people's radar. So Chamimi and TSW is my toss up. Maybe I go Rogue and play Hanzo because like Hanzo kind of beats some of the other stuff too. And like it's just a Chamimi deck without the Master Rune, but no, it's definitely
Yeah.
Chamimi or Time Spinning Witch for me. So
No, I'm like totally agree with you. Like I really wouldn't feel so confident playing something that is not Lorite right now.
yeah,
So it's green all over again. So I just say, okay, green, and then what else? Like I would personally, I just would like to play Brunhild, Jeanne d'Arc, which is such a cool deck, but I wouldn't feel too well. I
Right.
think such a deck works in like really open metas, but this right now is not really open because
it's
people
very
still have
quickly
a lot
getting
of
solved. Yeah,
exactly, yeah. And so I think these decks just gonna die at one.
yep,
So Gil is of course like a really great deck. I like playing Gil, but I think it's yeah, as you say, just don't want to lose to Brunhilds and Kyrix and stuff.
right.
So I would probably, and I'm not even sure if your matchup against Time Which is so good. So I think like in general, I mean the Palace version, not
Mhm.
the
Right.
control
No, I
version.
know what you mean.
So based on this logic, actually, I would most likely play Time Spinning Witch, but I right now I wouldn't be sure if I would play the Palace version or the more like controlling version, or if I would even do something like still like go against my principles and just slide into the controlling version and just throw in greenstones and stuff. I wouldn't know at the moment. It might be worth giving this idea a shot actually, but
Well,
yeah.
we will find out for sure which one's better after the event, the first GP of the off season this weekend. But I think that's going to be it for now. Thanks for having this conversation with me, Ben. And
Thanks with you.
yeah, thanks for, I guess, till next time, friendo. Take it easy, everyone.